Ever notice how Indians and Chinese people can't seem to be in the same room without subtle eye rolling? Two countries with literally billions of people, ancient civilizations, and massive global influence, yet they treat each other like annoying siblings competing for mom's attention. But here's the thing nobody talks about. This mutual disdain might actually reveal more about human nature than either side wants to admit. Let's dive into this fascinating dynamic. India and China don't just disagree on politics or economics, they fundamentally cannot understand why the other exists the way it does. And honestly, watching them interact is like observing two completely different approaches to being human. Picture this, you're at an international conference. The Chinese delegation arrives with matching folders, synchronized schedules, and a unified message delivered with military precision. 15 minutes later, the Indian delegation shows up with passionate individual speeches, animated debates among themselves, and at least 3 different interpretations of the same policy. The Chinese look at this chaos and think, how do they get anything done? The Indians look at the Chinese uniformity and think, where are the actual humans? Or consider their approaches to business meetings. Chinese executives come prepared with detailed presentations, predetermined outcomes, and clear hierarchical decision-making. Indian executives come ready to debate every point, challenge every assumption, and somehow turn a simple product discussion into a philosophical exploration of market dynamics. Both sides leave thinking the other group is either robotic or completely disorganized. Even their tourism styles clash hilariously. Chinese tourists travel in efficient groups, hit all the major landmarks, take the required photos, and move on schedule. Indian tourists travel in extended family clusters, spend hours haggling over everything, turn every meal into a social event, and somehow make friends with half the local population. Neither understands how the other experiences the world. But here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't just cultural difference, it's two completely opposite responses to historical trauma. China's approach is basically, never again will we be weak and divided. India's approach is, never again will we be silenced and homogenized. Same goal, totally different strategies. Think about their educational systems. Chinese education emphasizes collective achievement, standardized excellence, and systematic progress. Students learn to succeed as part of a larger mechanism. Indian education, despite its flaws, somehow celebrates individual brilliance, creative thinking, and intellectual rebellion. Chinese students excel at executing complex plans. Indian students excel at questioning why the plan exists in the first place. This creates fascinating workplace dynamics when they interact internationally. Chinese professionals are incredibly efficient at implementing solutions. Indian professionals are incredibly creative at finding problems with those solutions. Neither appreciates the other's contribution, but together they actually create better outcomes than either could achieve alone. The technology sector shows this perfectly. Chinese tech companies build massive, seamless platforms that work exactly as designed. Indian tech companies build flexible, adaptable solutions that somehow handle chaos gracefully. Silicon Valley needs both approaches, but Chinese and Indian engineers often think their counterparts are doing everything wrong. Here's what's uncomfortable to acknowledge. Both sides are probably right about each other's weaknesses. Chinese efficiency can be soulless and inflexible. Indian creativity can be chaotic and inefficient, but both are also wrong about their own superiority. Chinese people often see Indian disorganization and assume it means incompetence. But that apparent chaos is actually sophisticated adaptation to complexity. Indian systems look messy because they're designed to handle unpredictable variables that would break more rigid structures. Indians often see Chinese conformity and assume it means lack of creativity. But that apparent uniformity is actually sophisticated coordination at massive scale. Chinese systems look restrictive because they're designed to align millions of people toward common objectives that would be impossible through individual initiative alone. The really fascinating part is how they handle criticism. Chinese culture tends toward collective face-saving, careful conflict avoidance, and private problem-solving. Indian culture tends toward public debate, direct confrontation, and argumentative resolution. When these styles clash, Chinese people think Indians are unnecessarily aggressive. Indians think Chinese people are being fake or evasive. Their approaches to social media reveal this perfectly. Chinese social platforms emphasize harmony, shared experiences, and collective identity. Indian social platforms are basically gladiatorial arenas where everyone fights about everything all the time. Both sides look at the other's online behavior and think, this is exactly what's wrong with their society. But here's the plot twist. Maybe they need each other more than they realize. Chinese systematic thinking could solve a lot of Indian organizational challenges. Indian creative chaos could solve a lot of Chinese innovation limitations. The problem is neither side wants to admit they could learn from the other. This shows up in their global relationships too. China builds partnerships through economic integration and mutual dependence. India builds partnerships through cultural connection and shared values. Both strategies work, but they often end up competing for the same allies using completely different playbooks. The demographic factor makes this even more interesting. Both countries have over 1 billion people, but they're managing population completely differently. China used systematic control to manage growth, then systematic incentives to encourage it. India just let demographic chaos happen and somehow made it work economically. Neither approach should work as well as it does. Their urban development styles are perfect examples. Chinese cities are masterpieces of planning, with efficient transport, organized districts, and systematic growth. Indian cities are organic explosions of human activity that somehow function despite defying every urban planning principle ever invented. Both create livable spaces, but through completely opposite philosophies. Here's what I find most fascinating. Their mutual disdain might actually be projection. Chinese people see Indian chaos and fear their own potential for disorder. Indian people see Chinese control and fear their own potential for conformity. They're not just judging each other, they're rejecting parts of themselves. The business world forces them to interact constantly, which creates some amusing cultural collisions. Chinese companies entering Indian markets struggle with the unpredictability and relationship-based business culture. Indian companies entering Chinese markets struggle with the systematic processes and hierarchy-based decision-making. Both often conclude the other market is impossible to understand. Yet somehow, when they actually collaborate successfully, the results are incredible. Indian creativity combined with Chinese execution creates solutions neither could develop independently. But these collaborations require both sides to acknowledge that their way isn't the only way, which conflicts with both cultural narratives about superiority. Their approaches to international diplomacy show this same pattern. China emphasizes long-term strategic positioning, patient relationship building, and systematic influence expansion. India emphasizes moral leadership, principled stances, and value-based alliances. Both strategies have merit, but they often work at cross purposes on the global stage. The really uncomfortable truth is that both countries are probably more similar than they want to admit. Both are ancient civilizations trying to reclaim global relevance. Both are managing massive populations through rapid economic transformation. Both are dealing with the tension between traditional values and modern realities. But acknowledging these similarities would undermine their narratives about being fundamentally different. Here's my controversial take. India and China represent two equally valid approaches to organizing human civilization at massive scale. Chinese systematic coordination and Indian creative chaos are both responses to the challenge of getting billions of people to work together productively. Neither is objectively superior, but both cultures have convinced themselves that their approach is obviously correct. The mutual disdain comes from the fact that each side's existence proves that alternative approaches are possible. If China can achieve prosperity through systematic control, it challenges Indian assumptions about the necessity of creative chaos. If India can achieve growth through managed disorder, it challenges Chinese assumptions about the necessity of systematic control. Maybe the real issue isn't that they dislike each other, but that they force each other to question fundamental assumptions about how societies should work. That's deeply uncomfortable for cultures that have built their identities around their specific approaches to civilization. So here's what I want to know. Have you witnessed this India-China dynamic in professional or social settings? Did you see mutual respect develop, or did the cultural clash persist? Which approach resonates more with your own cultural background? And here's the bigger question. Are there lessons both cultures could learn from each other without losing their distinct identities? Can systematic thinking and creative chaos coexist? Or are they fundamentally incompatible approaches to organizing human activity? Share your observations about India-China interactions in the comments. I'm genuinely curious whether this dynamic plays out the same way in different contexts around the world. And if you think I'm completely wrong about their motivations or missed important aspects of this relationship, let me know. If you enjoyed this cultural deep dive, smash that like button, subscribe for more mind-bending cultural insights, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Which culture should I decode next? See you in the next one.